Hey everybody, welcome back to another fun and exciting Algebra 2 class. Today we are going to be talking about quadratic equations. The quadratic equations. There's actually 4 different ways to solve a quadratic equation, and we're going to talk about 3 of those ways in this lesson and then one of the ways in another lesson later. So let's go ahead and jump right into it because we have a lot to get through. If you want to open up your book, we are on lesson 2.4, and that is on page number 83. Lesson 2.4, page 83. You can follow along. All right, if you look down at the screen, I'm going to show you the steps for solving by factoring. The first way that we can do this is by factoring. So here's what you want to do. First of all, you're going to put it in standard form. Now, some of you might not remember standard form. There's a picture of it in your book there, but I can write it for you. Standard form looks like this. It looks like a x squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That would be what's called standard form of the quadratic equation. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. You need to know that. That is super important right there. That is called standard form. So this one is called the quadratic term. That's the one with the square. So that's the a term. The a is the quadratic. And then you have the b term, which is called the linear term or the line term. And then you would have the c term, which is called the constant term. The constant. Then don't forget to set them equal to 0. You always have to do that when solving quadratic equations. All right. The second thing that we're going to do when solving by factoring is we're going to factor. That makes sense. And then we're going to set the factors equal to 0, which technically we already did in the first thing if you put it into standard form. But then we're just going to carry it over and set each individual factor equal to 0. And then we're going to solve it, and then we're going to check it. Okay, so there's your basic steps. Let's go ahead and try one of these. Let's do x squared plus 24 minus 81 equals 0. Well, good news. It's already in standard form. We don't have to switch it around. We've got the quadratic term followed by the, linear term. Forgot my x there. Minus 81. That is the constant term. And then it is equal to 0. So we're going to want to now just factor it. So when I say factor, we're just going to be factoring the left side because the other side is going to be equal to 0. So I won't take the time to actually go through and tell you how to factor. You should already know how to factor. We would have an x plus and an x minus. And this is all going to equal 0 still. And to get our 24, the 81 is going to be 27 and 3. Okay. If you don't know how to do that, you have to factor 81 and then figure out what factors give you 24 in the middle. But that's what it is right there. Okay. So that is step number 2, factor. Step number 3, set factors equal to 0. Set the factors equal to 0. So now we're going to take this equal sign basically, and we're going to apply it to both of them. So I'm just going to do it right here, that easy right there, okay? So I just snuck that little 0 right in there to save me a little bit of time. All right, let me change colors here, and what we want to do now is do number 4, solve. You could say solve each equation if you want to. I think the book says, yeah, solve each resulting equation. So that's what we want to do here. We want to solve these equations. So in other words, we want to solve x plus 27 equals 0 by moving the 27 to the other side. X equals negative 27. And then if you're smart enough, you know, or paying attention enough, maybe you can look at that and go, hey, I can do that right there. Maybe if you're like me, you need to actually write it out and do it. So x minus 3 equals 0, plus 3, x equals 3. All right, so maybe some of you looked at it right there and you're like, oh, x equals 3. Okay, good for you. You can do that. You can save a little bit of time there. Okay, so now that I have my answers, I am just going to check it. So basically, that's all you do. That's the answer. I'm not going to take the time to check it. The check is in your book, but if you take those answers, and now here's the interesting thing. You take each one of these answers separately and you plug it in there. Okay? And it will give you the answer, which is going to be equal to 0. So plug in all that. It's going to give you 0. And then when you plug in 3 right there, to those two spots, it's also going to give you 0. They will both check. All right? And so you check it to make sure that your answers are correct. Now, there's something that happens here sometimes. Sometimes when you plug it in, it doesn't check. And we've already talked about that. That's the idea of the extraneous answer, the extraneous solution, it's called. So sometimes, now both of these do check. But let's say you plug this one in here, and you go to check it, and it doesn't check. Well, that one would be extraneous, and that's an example. That one actually is not extraneous. But maybe when you plug it in, it doesn't work out. So you could have extraneous answers here. So be paying attention. Make sure that you're doing your check. You have to check it to verify that you get the correct answer. Okay? The second one is called extracting the root. Extracting the root. And that is on page number 86. Sorry, page number 86. And here are the rules for extracting the root. Number 1, we're going to isolate the square. Number 2, we're going to square root both sides. Now remember, this is the same. We're doing the same thing. We're solving the same thing. We're solving quadratic equations. Just different methods, different ways of doing it. Why? Okay, so you say factoring's easy. Well, not every number is factorable. We can't always factor the number. Sometimes they come up with weird things with radical signs in them, and we can't factor it. So we need to learn other methods. So extracting the root. Square root both sides, solve, and then check. So this is what we need to do. Let's take a look at one of these. Let's do 3x squared minus 4 equals 71. Now, if you'll notice something, there's something missing in this one. And this one is where we don't have, I'm going to put no B term. When there's no B term, this is like a prime candidate for extracting the root. And in this one, we don't have a B term. Look, we have an A term, and we actually have 2 C terms, okay? And so, yeah, this is the way to do this one, and you just isolate the square. So, in other words, we want to isolate that guy right there. So let's move this -4 to the other side. Wait a second, what's going on here? Let's try that again. Move this -4 to the other side. And then it's going to cancel, and we're going to get 3x squared equals 75. But again, we're trying to isolate the square. So we want to isolate this. So we want to divide both by 3, and that's going to give us, let me come up here. I've already got something else written there. That's going to give me x squared equals 25. The next step is to square root both sides. So we're going to take this and square root it. We're going to take this and square root it. I didn't write something here, but I should have written something here. We want to make sure that we use that plus minus sign, because when we square root something, it can give us a positive and a negative. So when we square root both sides, this side over here, this is going to basically, what is the square root of x squared? Well, it's x equals, what's the square root of 25? Well, technically, it's positive -5. And that would actually be our answer. Remember, these are going to give us 2 answers because they're quadratics. They're squares. Do you know how to determine how many answers you're going to get? This is what you look at right here. The biggest exponent. The biggest exponent in this one is 2. So how many answers are we going to get? 2 answers. Let's say that it was just x equals 25. I'll make it super simple. Well, x1, and so we're only going to get one answer if it's x equals 25. That's only one answer. But if it's x squared equals 25, that's going to give us two answers because we have to square root it. It's going to give us x equals 5 and x equals negative 5. But you can just write it with the plus minus sign. That's fine. That'll save you some time. Okay. So that is the extracting the root. All right, now this last one's going to take us a little bit of time. I'm trying to move quickly through these because we already did learn these last year. These were in your Algebra 1 book. We're just reviewing them. This right here, completing the square, becomes very important in pre-calculus, so you need to learn this one. This one, you can't do certain techniques in pre-calculus if you don't know how to complete the square. So pay special attention right here. This is an important one. And it's the most complicated one that we've learned so far. So pay attention. Look at all these steps. First of all, we're going to move the c term to the other side. So we want to make it look like this. Ax squared plus bx equals negative c. So we want to subtract the c to move it over to the other side, or potentially add the c depending on what the equation looks like. Now, number 2, we want to reduce the a term, so this term right here, to 1. In other words, the leading coefficient needs to be 1. If we have a 3, just divide the whole thing by 3. If we have an 8, divide the whole thing by 8. We want to get that leading coefficient to 1. Now, step 3, this is the most important step right here. This one is kind of, you got to do this just right or else it's not going to come out right for you. We need to take half of the b term. So this term right here, we're going to take it, cut it in half. So if it was 8, now it's 4. Okay, so cut the b term in half. Then square it. So if it was 8, now it's 4. Now we square it. So now it's 16. Okay, and then we are going to add it to both sides. Okay, so then we're going to add it to both sides. So a lot of different stuff going on right there, but pay attention to that. Number 4, factor the left side and simplify the right side. Factor the left side and simplify the right side. You'll see what this looks like when we do the example. Number 5, square root both sides. Then I put the plus minus there. Don't forget when you do that, you get a plus minus. That's where your two answers are going to come in. And then we're going to check it. Okay? So let's try one of these. Let's do this one. X squared plus 8x minus 4 equals 0. Okay? So the first thing that we want to do is we want to take this and move it over here. And like I said, it's not always subtracting. In this one, it's adding. So we're going to add 4 because we want to cancel that, and we want to add 4 over here. So our new equation is going to look like this. Okay? And so that we've moved the c term to the other side. That was step number 1. Move the c term to the other side. We did it. Number 2, reduce the a term to 1. Hey, good news. The a term is already 1. We don't have to do that. Okay? Number 3, take half of, this is the tricky one, take half of the b term, then square it, and add it to both sides. All right, so let's try that. So we're going to take this term right here. This is the example I gave you, 8. Okay, so I knew that we were going to use this one, so I kind of ran that by you already. So we want to take 8, and we want to cut it in half. What is half of 8? That's 4. Now we're going to square the 4, and we're going to get 16. Now what does it say once we have the 16? It says, and add it to both sides. So we're going to take 16, and we're going to add it here, and we're going to add it here. Well, it kind of goes just right here. All right, so let's do that. Let's try that. So on the first side, we have x squared plus 8x plus 16. Since we don't have any numbers over there, we just kind of put it in there. Equals 4 plus 16, 20. Now don't forget to add it to this side. That's one of the main areas that students go wrong. They forget to add it to the other side. Okay? All right, so now let's go back up and look at the next step. Factor the left side and simplify the right side. Well, the right side we kind of already simplified, so now we just need to factor this one. And let me show you a little trick here. It's always going to create a square. Well, what's the name of this thing? Completing the square. Oh, okay. So we completed the square. We turned this into a square, in other words. So let's what do we get? We get x plus 4 squared. Write it like that. Don't write it x plus 4, x plus 4. Okay? And I'm going to show you why not in just a second, but this is the way to write it. Equals 20. Okay, so we simplified, that was our step number 4. We factored the left side and simplified the right side, so we basically now have it ready. So number 5 says square root both sides. We've done that before. So let's go ahead and square root both of these sides. Square root that and square root that. Now watch what happens when you square root a square. That's what we're doing. What happens is we just cancel those out. In other words, the square root cancels out the square. And so we end up with x plus 4 equals the square root of 20. Now let's not mess with the square root of 20 quite yet. We're going to do it in just a second. But I want you just to see that. And it's not just the square root of 20, it's plus minus the square root of 20. That's important. Okay. We can now move the 4 to the other side. And so we're going to get minus 4 minus 4. So now we're going to get x equals, let's do it like this, minus 4 plus minus the square root of 20. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to simplify that square root of 20. And the way that we would do that is we've already done this, so you should know how to do this, but we're basically going to reduce it out to the square root of 4 and the square root of 5. What comes out of here is a 2. And so here's what we end up. Here's our answer. Our answer is x equals negative 4 plus minus 2 square root of 5. And that is actually 2 answers, and you can write it separately. So you could write it like this. You could write it x equals negative 4 plus 2 square root of 5, and x equals negative 4 minus 2 square root of 5. So that would be your answer right there. Or you can also write your answer like this. It doesn't matter which format you use there to write your answer. Write it with the plus minus sign, fine. Write it with a plus sign and a minus sign, that's also fine. Okay? All right, so make sure that you're following your rules. You should be writing down these rules in a notebook somewhere. I'm not giving you these rules and then just have you, forget them. You're not going to be able to solve these if you don't remember the rules. So you need to write them down. Writing them down helps your mind to remember things. I say it all the time. Write it down. Write it in a book. Okay, it will help you to remember. All right, well, that's all I have for you today. I hope that you learned some things. If you struggled, go back, rewind the video, find it, watch it again. All right, we'll see you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.